That's a good discussion. They're kind of what we need to work on. So.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's a lot of fun. You know? Okay, good.
All right, we're going to get started again with the countywide half-cent sales tax project. Mayor, no, I think she just said it was in process, so that was the announcement. Do you have anything additional, Mayor?
I do have an announcement for those of you at home that are watching. If you are praying people and if you want to send good thoughts, I think that if you notice one of these things is missing in this group, and it's the thing that's typically present in the room.
Present.
And it's because that individual is probably in the process of becoming a dad. So if you could send your good thoughts to the Jensen family, that would be very much appreciated.
Thank you. Jason, you continue.
So continue the presentation. We're going to talk, hit one of our countywide projects. Dan, if you go to the next slide. So as most of you know, the countywide sales tax program had a specific list of street projects in there, and 12th Street, Southwest 12th from Gage to Kansas will be our second major street project we deliver out of this. The countywide fund also pays for bikeways, zoo master plan, and economic development activities, but I'm going to talk about street projects. And a number of the projects identified in the countywide are major traffic corridors through the city that would require significant expense to rehab or replace, but then also modernize to serve us well for the next 30 years. So this meets the council budget goal of investing in infrastructure, public safety, and quality of life, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. The estimated cost of this project is about $12.9 million. We just awarded a design contract this past week to Bartlett & West and the Tool Design Group to help us with this project, and we'll be starting design work this year. And so if we go to the next slide. So here's a picture looking towards Holiday Park. You can see the Holiday Cafe up there. An apartment building and part of the street condition. One of the things about Southwest 12th Street, as we go through this corridor, there are several distinct areas. As we think about this project, there's kind of the downtown section from Kansas over to Topeka Boulevard. You can think about another section from Topeka Boulevard over to Washburn Lane, and of course another section going over to Gage. And there's a combination of downtown and neighborhoods that this project will basically transform the look, character, and feel of that corridor. And why is that? And we'll go to the next slide. I don't know how many of you have been, the ones that are on the MPO committee, our Metropolitan Planning Organization, are aware that we have recently adopted complete street design guidelines. We've had a policy for complete streets for a number of years. It's actually one of the things that I look for when applying for a job here was, did we have a community that embraced the concept of complete streets? And what does that basically mean? That when we design a road, we're thinking about the different users on that corridor and or on that transportation roadway, and making sure that we are able to accommodate them. Our past practice, and we still have projects that need it, we have the GO item for complete streets, and that was basically adding elements to half-cent sales tax projects that needed complete streets, and we had a lot of the GO bond arterial corridors that we'd also use that funding for. This new process that we have kind of takes it to the beginning of the design, and we start to think not only about transportation, but how do we want that corridor to function? And probably Kansas Avenue downtown is one of the best examples. You know, as the community had that conversation, it wasn't just about the traffic, it was what is the purpose of this corridor? And it was about creating a thriving downtown. Well, complete street design guidelines are the same way. We came up with a number of what we call street types. So if you look at that kind of green picture up at the top, It gives guidance to the designers of what ultimately the aspirational condition of that corridor is. And you'll see that we created several different street types, from a mixed-use boulevard, neighborhood residential, rural residential, industrial streets for our industrial zones, shared streets, which, believe it or not, we're going to get one of those through the downtown plaza construction there on southeast 7th, next to the plaza. That basically will be a street that doesn't have any curb line and can be a plaza extension of the plaza space. And then also our alleys. We have residential alleys, but we also have some desire for some functional alleys within our commercial district. So what this process does is, and it's how we'll start with Southwest 12th Street, is we'll talk about the corridors we want. And that section of street probably will have 2, possibly 3 different corridor types. And then as the designers get into it, they look at how do we make that a complete street? What's needed to accommodate pedestrians, bikes, or the vehicle lanes along there, bus routes, freight, those different things. And then they define that typical section, and then we can drive through constructing that project. So this is going to be a real exciting project on Southwest 12th. It'll be our first starting out with this complete street design guidelines at the front. We're starting design in 2019, and like we've talked to you about having a systematic process, the goal would be in 2020 to start utility relocations. We've been talking to our utility partners about this project coming up so we can get those moved and out of the way. And then as we get into construction, it's going to take over 3 years to construct this project. And why is that? Well, if you've driven the corridor, you've seen the number of driveways and access points. We can't have the whole thing torn up at once, so there will be multiple phases that we deliver, and we also have to consider those phases with the other projects we have going on. So that's it for the countywide sales tax project. Next, I'll talk.
Let's bring up the spreadsheet, please. I think the other thing that we need to draw attention to here is it still has 3.33 million for preventive maintenance, which will be our 3rd period of doing that's for the microsurfacing that we're doing. So that's the leftover funds that we had. So that's a big figure, but that's money that we've had, and this was programmed in the past. And a couple of other things are scheduled there as far as the zoo's master plan and continuing our bikeways master plan.
Those are the big long runs on the major streets, the street ceiling projects. So,
correct.
You said that from what we saw last year, or this last summer, we're supposed to see 1 or 2 more years of that. Is that right?
That's correct. So this year, 2019, the 3.3 that's shown there was the excess from the previous countywide sales tax program that you approved for preventive maintenance. So last year we did kind of the central area within 70, I-470 loop. This year we're kind of working the east side. So in 2019 would be if you take Highway 75 kind of east of that, outside of the interstate highway system. And then in 2020 we would come back and do the west side. And then since the that excess for countywide would be consumed for preventive maintenance, you'll see a shift of it down. Actually, was one of the things we planned for to continue preventive maintenance, but through the citywide program.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you.
Yes.
Any questions?
If anybody knows off the top of their head, what's the revenue we receive from the zoo like for a year?
I don't know.
Talking about like our general operating revenue for the zoo?
Yeah, what they bring in?
From the half cent?
No,
Oh, in general.
Total.
I can get you an exact figure and we can have that as a follow-up question. I have a number in my head, but I don't want to misstate it
Okay,
to the group.
okay.
Yes.
Jason, on the 12th Street and the Huntoon Street projects, are the water lines going to be replaced at the same time that the streets are redone?
So we're working with utility department on which water lines. There will be some utility replacement on that, but whether it's a wholesale replacement, and the idea would be, as we look through those phases, can some of that work being done in advance of construction, or do we have to have, just because of timing, some of it actually go with the road construction? So we're looking at utility relocation needs, not only for our utilities, but the private utilities on all these projects.
Okay, good. Thanks.
No questions? Okay, we'll move on to citywide half cent.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the Fix Our Streets sales tax. Going to probably see a different name on that. You see we've got it in parentheses, citywide sales tax. This was what was approved by the voters in November, and we're very thankful for that. It provides about 52% of the funding for the pavement management program. Council set a goal to get us to a PCI of 60 over the next 10 years. We started at a 55. We're at about a 57 right now. So we're making progress along that. As we've talked about with you, we've had a number of streets that will need reconstruction in addition to the preventative maintenance and rehab and rehabilitation. This meets the council goal of investing in our infrastructure. And what I want to talk about in front of you today is a little kind of behind the scenes look at how we get into project selection. So what you're looking at here is what's called a heat map, the red reflecting more intense areas, the blue kind of lighter areas. And this is as we're looking at the rehabilitation portion of the pavement management program. So these are projects that would involve patching or mill and overlay. The actual streets, we run the pavement model to say, you know, what's the best use of dollars, and it looks at PCI and says, okay, here are those streets that would be good candidates for mill and overlay over the time period of funding. And the way the model works is, you know, it identifies individual streets, but the reality is when we deliver these projects in the neighborhood, you know, it would be foolish to bring in a lot of paving equipment and do the mayor's street, but then if Councilwoman Ortiz lived right next to her and not do her street, you know, you miss out on some of those economies of scale. And so part of that planning process is we get a recommendation from the model on the ideal locations for that fund. We have the budget that we're looking at every year, and then we start to kind of narrow in and circle some of those areas. What you're seeing, the big black circle up there in the Oakland area reflects that we've got a lot of preventative maintenance work, and we've got some rehab locations, so that's probably a good project area to match with some of our preventative maintenance. The yellow circles reflect areas that we're looking at from the 2020 to 2023, and you can see kind of those dark red areas of high concentrations of local streets in need of mill and overlay. And so that's just kind of a data visualization of those streets that we're working through and developing that plan. So that's just a short presentation on citywide sales tax, and if we want to go, I guess,
Back to the spreadsheet. And I think for me, what I would call out here relative to this is there's 11.5 million that is the work that Dr. Peak just talked about. So there's a good amount of money that's going to be invested in a variety of streets, and so I think that that's important. And then, of course, calling out the 10th Avenue project from Fairlawn to Wanamaker. There's an investment of over 2 years to get that project done. And then you saw that was also back in the geo bonding as part of the funding as well, in order to make that street match what we already have extended out to Fairlawn from Gage in previous years. And then otherwise, we're continuing on with regular projects that we've done in the past, getting some projects prepped and ready to go. As you look at Tyler Street, that's looking at work that's being done for design, utilities with eventual construction. So continuing that theme forward. So, Mayor?
Thank you, City Manager. So my question about Tyler Street, as we all know, Teresa has been advocating for this street for a long, long time. So the answer to this is we're doing the street.
We're doing Tyler Street, yes.
And based on, I see that we have several years of, or several processes of funding.
Yeah.
When can we tell our constituents that that street is going to be complete?
So you're seeing the third year of the CIB is when we anticipate construction. With that project and the other needs in the GO bond, we're having to leverage some of those other GO bond funds for like the complete street elements and citywide infrastructure, because this can only fund basically replacing what's there. So if the desire is to go to curb and gutter and storm sewer, we have to use that other GO piece to supplement that project. Adding sidewalks and those things like that, we have to use the complete streets elements. And so, this is kind of our behind the scenes effort of, as you're expressing interest in these projects, trying to put together the funding sources, stay within the constraints of the cap, and do all that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Jason, if we're going to do it, let's do it right. I'm sorry. So when I look at 21st Street from Golden to Whittingburg Road, and there was no curbs, gutters, or sidewalks. And we found money, and it looks nice in there, and we pulled kids out of the street that are catching the bus, and that's the thing that bothers me.
And that's our intent, to do that with
Okay.
this. So I just want to make sure you understand. It's just we're having to package different fund sources to deliver this project, but a lion's share of the work is replacement of the pavement. And so that's why you see a large expense in this.
Okay, thank you.
One thing, one question that I would implore us to move up is the southwest gauge from I-70 to 6th Street. That road is terrible, absolutely terrible, and it's a thoroughfare, especially from the north to the zoo, to the VA hospital, to Washburn, to Hayden. I see it, honestly, I see that from a importance. I see that much more important than 10th Street from Fairlawn to Wanamaker, quite frankly.
Sure.
Have you?
So
Go
maybe
ahead,
if
I'm
I
sorry.
let Brian Faust, he's our city engineer, I'd like him to talk a little bit about these projects.
Sure.
Yeah, Southwest Gauge, we actually short funded years out. We actually have a project in 2019 using traffic safety funds. We're actually adding a turn lane from I-70 to Inland Drive, and we will be reconstructing that road from I-70 to Inland Drive.
Is Emlyn down by the little shopping center? Is that
Yeah, it's
Emlyn?
just north of the high school.
Inland Drive
just
is-
north of the high school. Okay,
entrance
yeah.
to the-
And so what we actually have in the write-up of this, we're actually looking at trying to wrap in the rest of Gage from Inland to 6th Street this year in 2019. Just trying to leverage that money. But right now, we are doing a big portion in 2019.
And I wondered if that was, because I saw on this that it was shown as right away, and that was one thing that I was kind of confused about. But that's great. That's great to hear, because that's very well traveled
Right.
to a lot of our destinations, quite frankly.
Right, and I've driven it, I'm like, we need to move it up. But the great thing is with that traffic safety project, through KDOT, actually getting funding with KDOT help, do that the additional turn lane. And I said, we think we can piggyback on and extend it all the way to 6.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Just to finish that one isn't there yet a third project that's like under, remember this coming up about a year ago, that's maybe the bridge approaches or something at I-70 as well?
I mean, KDOT's working on, I think, the overpass on 75.
Okay.
When you're coming off of I-70 and getting onto Highway 75, they're working on a project there. Our project actually starts at 70 and runs south to Inland. And like I said, we hope to continue it all the way to 6th Street.
Okay. Because I remember going through the CIP last year and there were actually 3 different projects. So
On
that
Gage itself?
That must be the state one.
Okay.
Must be the third one.
Can I ask, thank you. Can I ask a question about Tyler? Let me go back to Tyler. Why are we stopping at Beverly? Isn't that, how far is that? Is that a half mile?
I mean, part of it's just the funding constraints. I mean, we're trying to look at programming the amount that we can do. There is a second phase, Beverly to Paramore, that we would do
That's
in the out years, but it's just like I said, it's trying to fit these different projects into the funds that are available.
I know 3 years ago I talked to someone about Morris and Tyler. I always swear if I ever had any power, I'd try and get something done about that corner. But the railroad's there and the house, and there was going to be a big issue. But that needs to be looked at. That is a terrible intersection, and with people going down that way to go to Walmart now, and Dillon's and Aldi's, and that needs to be looked at sometime.
So Council, what I wanted to say is we've got a number, it gets back to talking about different layers of projects. A lot of what we're talking about here in the half cent is the pavement management goals or life cycle replacement. As we talk about terrible, it's important to define what we mean by that. Is it a safety issue? Is it a traffic volume issue? Is it a pavement issue?
Yes.
So we are working on a traffic safety plan. We talked about this with the body before. We have about 5,000 accidents or crashes in Topeka annually. That draws not only on our public safety resources, fire and police to respond to those, but it also causes a lot of economic loss when there's injury and damage to those vehicles. So we're working on a plan to better inform the project selection that we do so we can mitigate what we can from an infrastructure standpoint to mitigate crash risk. But a lot of that comes down to driver behavior, education, and enforcement.
Well, yes, but when you have to stop, there's only one car that can go. You have to stop and wait because two people can't be on the road at the same time. You've got a house over here you really can't see around. So you have to go out a little bit, and if anybody's coming.
We have a lot of intersections that are older intersections with narrow streets, different designs, and it's about priorities within the budget. And so, the biggest one we have right now from the governing body is the pavement management goal and improving our pavement condition. So our efforts are focused on that, and we'll continue to work on traffic safety as well.
Can you have you done a traffic study there?
I'm not aware of a specific traffic study at that location, but the traffic safety plan does have analysis of 10 years of crash history within the city of Topeka and looking at where we have the highest locations of concern.
And I'm not really talking about accidents. I'm more or less talking about traffic pattern flow, I guess.
Sure.
Do we know how many people travel that? That's what I would like to know if we've never taken.
I'd have to get with planning department, but you also recall we had the long-range transportation master plan, the Futures 2040, that does look at volume and capacity needs throughout the city through 2040. And most of our capacity or enhancement projects are at like I-70 and 75. We don't have what we call significant congestion issues within the city.
Okay. So can we get some kind of count? I'd like some kind of count on how many vehicles go around that corner. Does that cost a lot of money to put that little counter out there?
No, man. I mean, we can do traffic counts, but I guess the question would be to what end are we?
Because I want to know. Because I think that's traveled more than you give it credit for. I think there's more people travel that road.
Okay.
So if it doesn't cost like $1 million, I mean,
it's not about cost. We have a lot of work resources. We can schedule that in if that's the desire to do that.
It's my desire.
Deputy Mayor, do you want to count?
Mike's in.
Tell him to do a count. Pretty simple.
Got to take direction from the city manager,
Well,
from us.
Going back and forth, ask for it, do it, let's go.
Sounds like a good candidate for a roundabout. So I know we all have specific projects in our districts that we'd like to see moved up.
That's right.
In fact, I would say we probably got to should go ahead and prioritize everything in District 7 first. But what about the projects that aren't on here? I know we had a discussion at our meeting maybe 3 weeks ago about how, you know, a case could be made that Indian Hills may be in more dire need than Urish, for example. Or when we have some that are in the 6 to 10 year plan. I know you've got 29th Street from Fairlawn to Wanamaker. It's a street that I hear about quite a bit, and I'm sure Councilman Cohen does as well. And that's scheduled 10 years out. Does that necessarily mean that nothing will be done to that street for 10 years? Or are we looking, I know the 37th Street in Mr. Padilla's district was recently got a mill and overlay. It was not, in fact, it's still 10 years out on the CIP. So could you kind of elaborate on how that works?
So some of those larger arterials, as we look through the mill and overlay, or what we call kind of the deferred maintenance measures, things that are basically done to hold those roads until we can do that larger project, those can occur. That kind of functions within that program piece of the pavement management, rehab and reconstruction, and that analysis we went through. There's the preventative maintenance piece, which is another program element, so doing crack sealing, and then there's just the continued operations for pothole repair and things like that we may do on a project. The last piece I'd say is, what this document reflects is kind of our technical recommendation. So it's definitely, the body's desire. If you want to change delivery timing of any of these projects, you can that's what we're here is to get feedback and look at that. The other thing I'd also say is that was part of the reason why we put the council community support project in there, was if there was a specific thing you weren't seeing on the list and use the body, because our job is to give you that technical recommendation. I think, what we're looking from you is if you want to move one up, then, there's going to be another one that has to move back. And so there has to be some joint agreement on that. This is what we think from a technical recommendation.
So just for clarification for the new guys like myself, if there are recommendations or changes in this that we would like to see, is that something that we bring to you and have you address whether or not that should happen? Or is that something that we talk about it with the whole body and vote on it? Or, I mean, what should be the correct process of perhaps getting a specific intersection or stretch done?
Well, the short first answer is hopefully that at the end of finishing the presentation, that we have 15, 20 minutes that we do that kind of discussion. And you've all been making notes about a variety of the projects that are being done or not being done. And then at the end of the period, we have a discussion about what would you consider changes and and then test the appetite. We're all here in the room together. Let's test I'd like to see this project moved. Do you guys agree? Is there support for this kind of a change, so that if we can capture that information now while you're all here and a workshop purpose, we can do that now. We didn't necessarily, look to have that debate this stage,
right?
But that it is exactly what we should do at the end of this. Then from that, if there isn't a agreement today, you would bring that request for an amendment to me, and then I would provide it to finance, and then we would meet with the program manager and have a discussion about, if this happened, this would be what we would have to do in order to make that happen. And then at one of the next meetings in March, where we talk about CIP, we would simply bring that up as there was a request to amend the budget to move this project in order to accomplish that, we have to move this project out. What's the wishes of the governing body? And that's how we handle it.
And just one real quick follow-up on these projects. Is there a way that we can tell on here what ships have already sailed? Because I'm sure that some of these projects, the engineering's already been done. They're shovel ready, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, so on the individual project sheets, it'll indicate if it had previous year's funding.
Okay.
And so a lot of those that within the transportation section that have previous year's funding reflect projects that have probably initiate it. If there's a specific one that you want kind of a status of where it is, we can get you that information.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Anything else?
I have a suggestion and a couple of questions. The suggestion would be that maybe on these projects, like what you were just talking about, that have multiple funding sources, if there could be just an asterisk next to them so that it's, because it's hard to track it. You think that that's all the money that's there for it, and then you all have shared, like with the North Tyler project, that there's some money elsewhere. If there could just be a standard, to me, real simple would be an asterisk, so that it just caught our eye that there's other money for this project someplace else. As we read through it, it might help us understand what we're seeing. The question number one was in this citywide sales tax in 2020, I assume just 2020, is there any carryover from the first 10-year sales tax like there is in the county in this budget?
So, Nick can probably explain it better than me, but you're approving an annual capital authorization out of this budget where you see the carry forward from the sales taxes also through the operating budget. So as we get into...
I just wondered if this is any old money versus new money.
So this reflects the annual, what we anticipate from kind of a revenue, new money, and then you budget the entire fund with the carry forward as part of the operating budget.
Later.
This spring, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question was, there was a resolution regarding the curb and gutter money. Originally, curb and gutter was $500,000 a year, and then $1 million got added a few years ago for snow removal. When this went forward this time, there was a caveat passed by this body that couldn't be used for snow removal unless there was permission of the body at the time. So is this budget to do 1.5 million a year in curb and gutter at this point each year? Or?
That is what this budget reflects, is a curb and gutter replacement program at 1.5 million. I think Brian can speak to the what the estimated service life that would do on curb and gutter, but it's a long. But Brian, give that number.
So right now we have roughly 1,600 lane miles of road. And so an estimate would be twice that amount in curbs.
Sure.
And so you're looking at 3,200 miles of curbs. Our price is about $50 a foot to remove and replace. And so at $500,000 a year, our replacement cycle was, I think, about 1,600 years before we get back to replace the curb. So if you double that to or 1.5 million, you're going to be about 500 years on a replacement cycle.
Well, when we started the first 10-year plan, what they were working from was their list.
Right.
Because the city takes either by observation or by call-in and makes a list of people who have noted that their curb, usually just a section, has fallen apart. And when we started the first 10-year plan, which you may not have known, they thought that we would probably in 3 years get rid of the list that they carried into that plan, but then they would continually add to it. So, I mean, actually, because many of our streets are more than 2 lanes, if they're 3 and 4 and 5 lanes, you don't have as many curbs. Plus, we do those on major projects rather than incrementally, as a rule. So, I guess once you've got your asset done, it'd be a whole lot less than 500 years.
And what we did, we do have the C-Click fix. It used to be the 311 system.
Right.
We've taken a tremendous number of calls for curb and gutter. And what we're telling people, we're 4 or 5 years out currently based on current funding before we get to their curb. And it was
That's where my question was going.
Right. We were doing the oldest first, the oldest complaint first, and working our way to the newest complaint. Mm-hmm. But what that was doing, we were jumping around all over town. So I do a few feet over here, and then I do a few feet over there. Mm-hmm. And so we actually have Jason showed you for the payment management, we actually have a heat map for calls. And so what we look at is if we're working in an area, let's knock all those out in that area. And so being more efficient with our contractors. But when we get there, this guy's complained, but the person next door hasn't. That curb just as bad.
Right.
And so do you replace that one section that somebody called, but not do the one right next door? So that's one of our challenges.
And your answer has been?
In the past, we just replaced the one that's called, quite honestly.
So you're looking at?
Trying to do areas to knock those areas out.
I mean, you know, I get in the middle of some of those.
Right.
And then you get to the debate on who called in when first and all that.
Right. But, you know.
I just really wanted to check and see how you're doing it.
Right. It doesn't make, you know, if I go to one neighbor and I replace their curb line, and then we pull out and go somewhere else, the neighbor next door, why didn't you do mine?
I understand.
And so what we, like I said, with those heat maps, we're seeing areas that have a lot of call-ins. And so it seems to make sense to us to let's go knock that area out while we're there. And then move to the next area. But what that does, it might, people who called in 6 years ago, you know, can get a little frustrated because they thought they were next and we're concentrating in another area. So.
Well, I think people know your program's evolving, and it sounds like it's evolving in a good way. I just wondered if you had an idea, you know, because that's substantially more money than was available for curbing. And even was it too much? Because if we were going to do 500,000 in curbs instead, then that could pop $1 million for something else.
Right.
So.
And the 500,000, I mean, we've been trying to average that over the last several years. We were doing just one or two major contracts every year. And what we decided to do about 2 years ago was go with a lot of smaller contracts. That way we could get smaller contractors in there, tighter time frames to get it done. And so we bid it out at $50,000 a year and give them 30 to 45 days to get that section done. The challenge with that is at $500,000 a year, we got 10 different contractors or contracts that we're trying to manage. Then when you go to 1.5 million a year, it's a challenge for us to, quite honestly, to do that.
Well, that's why I was asking, because, you know, that million could go toward something else depending on what your inventory was.
Right. But again, we have if you look at older residential subdivisions that were done 40 and 50 years ago, the concrete streets and the curb lines are actually better than the streets that we may have done 20 to 25 years ago. There was issues with the concrete and the aggregate that was used.
Right.
We now have adopted a hard rock, a new standard for that, so the new construction will be much better.
Right.
But there's a lot of curb out there that's just really bad.
Mr. Faust, thank you for that. A question then, are you saying that what you're doing now, you used to go out with See-Click Fix and you would, you know, maybe replace it in front of one person's house? Now you're using a heat map, so you might do the whole block on both sides. Is that correct?
That's where we're going to.
Okay.
Because, again, it didn't seem to make sense. You know, you don't want to put the blinders on, and almost to the point like code enforcement, I get a call in this one house, and I only look at that one house. I don't look left, and I don't look right. And that's the problem with the curb. If we just looked at that one house, it could be just as bad both left and right. So.
And if I may, thank you for that. And you said you bid it out. You have like an indefinite quantity contract bid with a bunch of people, correct? But that's for smaller. When you have like a couple blocks, do you take a separate bid on that, or?
If we were to do hey, we want to knock out an area, we would actually probably bid a more formal process.
Okay.
Because it may make sense to use a curb machine versus doing
right.
hand form.
That's what I was getting at. You know, your $50 a foot doesn't sound out of line at all on little sections, but if you're doing, I know years ago Joe Conroy's about $7 or $8 a foot on new stuff.
Right.
They could get 3,000 or 4,000 foot a day. And
right. We get a better price, but in a lot of these areas we're going through residential areas.
Sure.
And so that includes the driveways.
Right.
And so that causes more challenges with the laydown machine. 70 feet hand form, 70 feet hand. You know.
Right. It's expensive. Thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Well, and I know this just happened with Kansas Avenue Bridge. Where's that money coming from? Do we need to put it next?
We're looking at funding that out of some of the contingency that was in the half-cent sales tax program that was already approved within the 2019 budget.
And do we have an amount yet?
We do not have an amount. Ryan sat down again. Let him-
Sir, can you just stay up there, please?
Well, actually, we did the testing, and the steel beams were damaged to a point where they're not repairable in the area the fire occurred, along with damage to the concrete deck. And so we actually have a plan to replace a portion of the slab and beams. A rough order of magnitude is about $600,000 for that work. We're kind of looking in the $800,000 to $900,000 when it's all said and done.
I know constituents are very concerned about that bridge because we get a lot of traffic to come to downtown, that work downtown, and they're even really concerned with their safety now, even though that we have it, that you can go both ways.
Right.
And so that's why I'm asking, because I continuously hear, and several. I was very little when that Kansas Avenue Bridge went down. So that's just concerning to me with the big buses going over there, the big trucks going over there, and so I just didn't know how that was going to be funded, if we needed more funding, or if we get into it and it sees that we need more funding, how will we handle that?
I mean, I think we approached it correctly once the fire occurred. I mean, we immediately shut it down. We wanted to make sure what we had, we wanted to make sure it was safe. And the testing came back. I mean, we actually had a company lined out to come in and straighten the beams. Assuming the test results came back positive, we could actually straighten the beams and reopen the bridge. But those test results came back not positive. And so we already have an engineer working on the repair. And we would hope to have that done sometime like this summer.
And then will the Curtis fly-off, will that continue to be shut until we're done with it, or was
Correct.
it hurt,
Yeah,
or
with the two-way traffic on the one bridge,
we just wanted
we still want to
for
keep
safety?
that closed. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have, this, you may not know this question, do we have access to any federal funds for the repairs to this?
I'm not aware of any. No.
And secondly are we self-insured on this, on the bridge, or do we carry reinsurance? Where are we at on that?
It was self-insured.
So where are we, then kind of back to Sylvia's question, where are we going to take the money out of reserves for this?
It's out of the county, citywide reserves that we had, the contingency that was available.
Thank you.
Is the bridge considered safe by the engineers for the two-way traffic that it is carrying now?
Yes, it is.
So just to throw it into the mix, the mayor has had some excellent advice from folks across the country, and included in that was just to take it down to a two-lane bridge. Anyway, has that been considered?
No.
No, I'd say if it's the desire of the body to look at a different configuration than what's there, I mean, we need to hear that feedback from you, because our intent was just to replace in kind.
I haven't consulted with any of my colleagues about it, but I remember that was one of the suggestions that came, and if we wanted to do that, it was very providential that occurred like within a week of that input that the mayor got. So
Why would you do that?
the idea was to have it be much more of a bike and ped bridge because of for connectivity between Noto and downtown, as well as increased activity on the river, and that based on the volume of traffic that goes across it, that I don't know that any studies had been done, but we all know. I mean, when I heard that, I thought, well, we've all of us have been through the reconstruction of the Boulevard Bridge as well as the reconstruction of the Kansas Avenue Bridge, and we really only need one. We just need a backup in case one of them's out or something. And so I would imagine that the traffic count would work if we wanted to do that.
But if you get additional, like the riverfront and all that, that's going to add traffic, not then you're just going to push that over to Topeka.
The engineers would need to do the traffic counts and so on, and those projections as well, but it's still pretty manageable. It would make the Boulevard Bridge obviously the primary bridge in Kansas Avenue, still connecting everybody that wants to use it now.
While we're on this topic as well, have we given some thought, have we had conversations moving in the future of at least creating some type of barrier? I'm not going to say wall.
Don't do it.
But
Please don't do it.
honestly, some type of barrier that extends out from that vulnerable area lower, so, you know, because we're writing an unbudgeted $1 million check here at some point in time, it sounds like. And I understand we have the camping, all those ordinance going, but at the same point in time, we do have a right to protect our assets from damage. Have we looked at some type of barricade that extends out, I don't know, a certain amount of yards to have a combustible material that went up would be likely to do no damage? Have we looked at that?
Yes, we've been looking at those possibilities. We started with just installing signs for no trespassing to limit the legal authority of individuals to be in that area. And so we've done that, and then we're also looking at the possibilities, having discussions with folks from NODO as to what the right solution would be for that area. They are doing some work with the county relative to the possibility of some type of park in that area. So we need to continue to work with them to figure out what's going to be the best solution in conjunction with the other projects that they're looking at. And so that's being discussed, yes.
Thank you.
One of them was that we would kind of lease it to them and let it be a park that they managed, which would give them the authority to call law enforcement if people were on it, right?
And there isn't a way to lease that property. The way it works with regards to that right away, we cannot lease right away. Okay, we need to move on here. We're bumping up against our time here. Do you have any federal funds?
Sure. So federal funding, we do receive federal funds for different city projects. I'm going to talk about a transportation one that we get, sometimes what we call state aid. I mean, direct dollars for the state. We also get what's called federal fund exchange dollars from the state that we can apply to transportation funding. The Southwest Wanamaker, Huntoon, and I-470 ramps is a continuation project of the work that's already going on out there. We recently did Huntoon Street, the hill there. We're working on Arvonia and Winding Road. That'll be under construction this year, and this is a continuation of traffic capacity enhancements to support economic development as well as improve our pavement condition. This project meets the goal of investing in infrastructure. This is approximately a $4.2 million project that includes about a $2.2 million share from state and federal funding. And if we go to the detail slide, this is basically looking westward there up the hill of Huntoon at Wanamaker, and similar to the project west of there, we'd be looking at improving traffic capacity through lanes, evaluating medians, as well as replacing pavement. And it's like I said, it's a combination of funding sources, about $1 million from general obligation bond, citywide sales tax, and federal at a little over $1 million, and the federal state share at $2.2 million.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when you get off, because that was going west, right? Going west up Huntoon. But when you get off I-470, coming on Wanamaker, have we looked at that, Jason, to alleviate some, because it gets so backed up with traffic?
Brian, come up and talk about all the details.
Yeah.
So a little different presentation style. We had me hit the high overview, but
Right. And I didn't know if that's not in this, we can go on, but it's just when you get off, you can't, it's just so hard out there.
Brian and his team do a really good job with these projects.
I just need his number, I'll just call him.
And we will evaluate that as we start in that design process. We want to make sure when we're done that, this is for capacity. We want to make sure that it's designed so we don't have those continual delays.
Okay. Because I know just even if you want to get all the way over to Hugo, that's bad. It's kind of like Fairlawn, how it was all cut up. And even when you're getting off, nobody will let you in. It's just bad all the way around, all the way around. Thank you.
Anything on this?
Probably.
All right, we have a half hour till we originally planned to go till noon. I think we can get started relative to utilities projects and.
Hold on, Jason. I want to tell you, you've got an impossible job,
Yeah.
but you're making it possible. You do a great job for what you're up against. You've tried to make everybody happy in an impossible situation. So I just want to thank you for the job that you do.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Sample?
He does good. He's amazing.
Well, good morning. So we'll get started. Good afternoon, almost. Okay. So we could go back to the previous slide real quick. Okay, so this is the capital improvement budget and the CIP for utilities. One note is that we did assume a reoccurring 6.55 rate increase as we built the plan. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about three of our replacement programs. These are very important programs that funds our replacement of our water, wastewater, and stormwater lines. The first one we'll talk about is the annual water main replacement program. As you can see, we have 890 miles of water main in Topeka, and to replace all of those water mains at one time, it would cost us $980 million. We prefer to have a 100-year replacement cycle, and for all of our water, wastewater, and stormwater lines. Currently, we have budgeted it for 2020 $4 million in this program, and that would equate to 245-year replacement schedule. Last year, we replaced 26,000 linear feet of water main. That equates to just about 5 miles of water main. Okay, our annual wastewater lining and replacement program, we have 717 miles of sewer lines in Topeka. And of course, our target is 100-year replacement cycle, and we're funded at $4 million in 2020, and that would equate to a 196-year replacement schedule. This last year, and we're just now finishing those projects, but we did 2 projects, and we've either rehabbed or replaced approximately 5.5 miles of sewer line, along with 114 manholes. And so out of that 5.5 miles of sewer line that we addressed, about 4.8 miles of it we were able to line. And so lining is certainly a lot cheaper than doing a full cut replacement. And then, of course, our annual storm conveyance program, we have 400 miles of storm sewer lines in Topeka. And this project is funded at $2 million for 2020. That would equate to a 167-year replacement cycle. The majority of this money is to replace storm lines along with street projects is spent in that area. Yeah, I want to talk about the Montero Water Tower that we're proposing. We have an existing tower of 500,000 gallons. A new tower that we would need would be a 1 million gallon tower, and this would be to improve fire flow to the south zone, and even more specifically to the industrial park, the Kansas Fire Industrial Park. We're going to need that additional capacity and volume for an industry that comes in. And it's a $3.3 million project. And yeah, if you go back real quick, the the picture of that tower is on the left, and then I've got a picture of a water tower. It's a 1.5 million gallon water tower. We're proposing a 1 million gallon tower, but that's what it would look like, just about what it would look like. So this is a map showing where the new tower would go. The pump station that you see in green is just west of Topeka Boulevard, off of University Boulevard, about a half a mile west of that. And so that's where we would propose the new tower to go. The blue lines are water lines. The dotted lines are city limits. So the tower would actually be in the county, but it would be serving city Topeka customers. But it would provide that very well needed water volume for an industry coming in. It's on our property now. We own that property. Yes.
Mr. Sample, thank you for that. Question. So this is really to serve the industrial park, and it's also going to help out Montera area, which is county. Can you tell me, I'm not opposed to the project at all, but just thinking funding here, have we approached either JADO, since it's going to benefit their industrial park, or our industrial park, our joint industrial park? It's also going to help out a county neighborhood.
Correct.
Has there been any approach to them?
No, we have not. I've had some preliminary discussion, but I think that's certainly a possibility to get some assistance from JADO.
Oh, thank you.
And I have one item to add. When the development agreement was done with Mars, there was an agreement that a portion of funding would be diverted for potential fire department location down in that area. So we could potentially include the use of that funding instead of for a fire department, potentially for the water tower. And so we're looking at pursuing that as well. So that may be a set of funding that could assist with the price, with the cost of that. And that would make sense given that it supports the area where that's located. So we will discuss that with them.
Thank you.
Mr. Sample,
Yes.
why are you moving it? Why are you moving it to another location?
We own that property, but we will still need to keep the existing tower to get the
Okay.
volume we
Oh,
need.
okay.
And right now, the existing tower serves that south zone, or that Montera area, and the volume needed is very minimal. We had a break last year, water main break on 47th and Topeka Avenue in that area. And what happened was, when we occurred that break, the tower started draining really quick. And you never want to have a tower run out of water, and then you run into then you're going to be just all kinds of issues at that point where you would have to do a
Okay, so
notice.
keeping that one. Okay,
Right,
thank you.
so we'll keep both towers. That will give us adequate capacity for that zone.
Will it increase the amount of water we can sell or not?
Yes, there would be more volume there with another tower, another 1 million gallons. The big issue with the industries coming in is they need to have that fire protection, and we've got to have that volume really to provide that fire flow. So, yeah. Okay, so this is the North Topeka wastewater pump station rehab project. It's a 2021 project, $2.8 million. So this is an aging wastewater pump station. So you can see a picture of it. It's a can station, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means. If you can, go back real quick. So a can station is just that. It's a pump station that's built into a can. So what you're looking at in that picture is half of that can, and that's the part that's above ground. That's approximately 13 feet tall. Can pump station there has a diameter of somewhere around 6 or 7 feet. Now the piece that you don't see is the other half of that can, which extends down underground another 20 feet. And then in the bottom of that can then is where your pumps and valves and pipes are. And that's all dry. And then just a few feet to the north of that pump station is another underground tank called a wet well. And that wet well is what collects all the water from that northwest service area into that wet well. And then the pumps in the bottom part of that can station pump that wastewater right to the North Topeka plant. That pump station is located at the North Topeka plant. And pump station was put in 1970, and we've had, there's a lot of deterioration. A can station like that, when it's that size, it's very hard to work on. The only way you can access the bottom of that pump station is through an elevator, if you can call it, and I'm going to show you an example of that. So you're bringing tools and pumps and equipment down a very small space to get to the bottom. In 2007, some folks were working in that pump station. They were actually pulling a pump out, and the valves didn't hold, and we actually flooded that pump station. They were able to get out safely. So, but anyway, next picture. So this is, if you see a shiny object coming out of the pump station, that would be me. But I thought I might show you, this is the elevator. It might help put it in perspective of what this pump station's about. So it's a pump station that's certainly in need of repair and rehab.
The weight capacity of that that's a joke.
Yeah, that's and I can tell you, it's been a few years since I've been down in the bottom of that pump station. I went down last week, and two of us, my size, it's pretty cramped down there when you're trying to work on these big pumps. So
do you have a picture what it would be after you rehabilitate it?
Well,
is it larger? Is it?
I think we'll have to look at that and then study. My desire would be, and I'm not sure that we can do that, would be just to eliminate that big can, get rid of it completely, take that wet well that I talked about, that other underground tank, and just add submersible pumps to it. And then we wouldn't even have that structure. But that certainly has to be designed and looked at to make sure that the wet well is adequately sized and in a condition that we could do something like that.
All right. Well, if you can go to the utilities spreadsheet, we'll start with stormwater. There's a number of other projects or programs that are done by utilities that relate to that. And so some of these in the utilities department appear as annual projects. So staff will identify the particular projects that they want to do, and this provides them the funding source, and they basically look at the project that's needed the most for desired completed. The same is relatively true with you as you look at the wastewater, although you can see there's a major project in the East Side Interceptor combined sewer, Oakland wastewater plant UV expansion. So there are some other specific projects that they've identified that need to be done. And then continuing the solids handling upgrades phase 2. So if you have any project, and then we'll real quick look at the water. Scroll down for the water. There's a list of their projects. Primarily the one is the Montero Water Tower is our main one that is new. So any questions?
Yeah. Two questions. One is the Oakland solids handling upgrades. Is that what we had talked about a while back that had to do with capturing methane gas and being able to sell that off instead of burning it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct.
And then the other question I had is, could you briefly just let us know what that East Side Interceptor item is? I mean, it's hands down the largest item on here. So.
Yes, East Side Interceptor is a very, very large sewer that makes its way into the Ash Street pump station. It carries a lot of wastewater from the east side. And so that's a project where we're actually cleaning that interceptor and then doing rehab in areas where it needs to be rehabbed. Now that's an area where, as we had a consent order with KDHE, and as it relates to overflows, one thing that we were able to do was clean that interceptor and determine that we've got a lot more volume than we had just by cleaning that interceptor. And that's really helped us with being able to get the flow into the Ash Street pump station and then pumped into the Oakland treatment plant. So there's another project out there called the Ash Street pump station. That really follows the east side project because we have to be able to analyze what's happening with that east side so we know how to size that Ash Street pump station, the pumps and the force main.
So are you like, I know you said you cleaned it, but is it like, are you going to completely replace the whole thing, or is it like you're going to do a lining on it, or is that like a modern way of doing things, or is that like the way they used to do it and we're just getting it brand new the way that they designed it initially, or?
We're going to be able to keep that existing interceptor, which is the great news in this story. We are going to have to do some rehab to it. There'll be some lining and some spot repairs. But if we were to have to replace that large of an interceptor, it would be very costly. Does that answer? I hope that answered your question. Okay. Yes.
I guess we usually see this in the operating budget, but something I've been really impressed by with the utilities is how many of the projects, smaller projects, are done with utility cash in the funds. And I couldn't remember, I guess we don't display them on the CIP like we do some of the others. But you do have some, I mean, when you get these utility projects, they're big. We can see them here. But in stormwater, we've got a number of annual programs that are called Best Practice Management Development or Drainage Correction. They seem like maintenance. Could you talk for a moment about why they're in the CIP versus the operating budget and whether they're on their way there?
Yeah, well.
Because when I first got elected, you had all of stormwater.
All of stormwater.
That's operating
correct.
cash, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I know how you can run the department.
So, right, exactly. And there are those different programs designed to be able to help us stop inflow and infiltration and all those things. But to get to your question, I might have Nicole come up and talk a little bit about where we have those in the budget, if that would be okay.
I can see where they are, and it's
right.
simply a matter of whether they're in motion toward getting back into the operating budget or not.
Right.
Sure. Actually, we can speak to those. They were brought into the CIP because of the size of the program. Those two that you identified are actually still cash funded.
Okay, good.
Yeah, they are cash funded programs, but due to the size of them, they are identified here to bring to your attention in the CIP.
Okay, well, it would be helpful then if they were marked, because I thought they were, and then when I was looking, everything that got highlighted was bonded, and so I couldn't tell.
Sure.
Okay.
And we struggle with that, how to identify that within the CIP. Can actually absolutely get you a list of those programs that are still cash funded.
It might help to just break them out, cash versus revenue bonds, like has been done before, because I think that's great. So, great answer.
So this is Nicole Malott. She's our business and customer service manager. Just introduce her.
Hi.
I think actually it'll be helpful for us to see that as we vote on this too.
Mr. Sample, I don't know if you've already covered this or not. Sorry, I was out for a couple minutes, but I was over at the plant last year, actually working on a project, and we had to go in the intake building. And when I went in there, I think that'd be something very instructive. Everyone on the council to go look at that. I mean, you had stuff in that intake. You only have 2 intakes, I believe, for water for the whole city.
Correct.
And it was like stuff from it looked like from the 1800s. It was probably from the 1900s. But it scared me to death. And I do see in here you have like $1 million a year for water treatment plant and rehab. Is that a realistic amount of money to modernize those things?
No, that's not near enough money to get that plant up to where it needs to be. So we've done a master plan, and we've identified a lot of maintenance that needs to be done to that plant. So no, that is not adequate to do everything we need to that plant, that water plant.
Is there some point in the future you guys might? Is that something you can share with us at some point? What it would take? And this plant stuff is not anything I do, so this is not anything drumming up business.
Yeah.
It's just simply it scared me to death when I looked at these old pumps and these pipes that I don't think you can get parts for anymore in a lot of cases.
Right. Right, and we do have in 2023 money budgeted for that west intake.
Okay.
Now, that's 2023. We've had to really work hard with our CIP to address the bond indebtedness, and so sometimes we've had to move projects out there further than we would really like to.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Other questions on utilities?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. The Norwood pump station looks awesome. Very, very good.
thank you.
I think it turned out, whoa,
Yeah, it did. It fits in real nice.
it does.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
IT? Mark will go through some of the IT information.
Good morning. The IT CIP structure is based on technology expenditures of $50,000 or greater. CIP items are also part of the IT annual operating budget in the form of operating leases. Operating leases are used to finance expenditures that cannot be funded within a single fiscal year. The IT CIP is organized into 5 categories. We have personal computers, mobile data terminals, network infrastructure, Microsoft software licenses, and then a Microsoft Azure cloud storage type initiative, which I'll discuss. We're at about 1,000 desktop laptops. Our average annual cost is $100,450, and we rotate our PCs every 4 years. Mobile data terminals, we're at about 154 MDTs. Our average annual cost is $119,700, and we try to rotate our mobile data terminals about every 4 years. And this is an example of what a mobile data terminal looks like in a police department vehicle. And this is an example of what an MDT looks like in a fire apparatus, fire engine. Moving on to our network infrastructure, our network switching infrastructure. Our average annual cost is $146,878, and we try to upgrade our network switches about every 4 years. We have 2 storage network arrays. The average annual cost is $162,500, and we also try to upgrade those on a 4-year cycle. We also have a data backup network infrastructure. It's a disk-to-disk system. That's part of our disaster recovery plan. The average annual cost is $132,500, and we upgrade that system every 3 to 4 years. Our Microsoft software licenses, we have a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. The average annual cost is $225,000, and that contract is based on a 3-year term. With the Microsoft Azure initiative, we're researching potential cost savings by moving some of our archival storage to the cloud. We're starting to find that cloud storage provided through Microsoft or Amazon is starting to become more cost effective. So we think we might be able to move some of our non-critical archival type information to the cloud and save costs with their on-premise 2 storage arrays. So that is my presentation. Go ahead.
Okay, so how many places do you back up now? 2?
We have 2 storage arrays that are located in 2 separate facilities, and then our data backup system is located in a 3rd.
So 3 different places?
Yes.
And why do you do 3? Why not 2?
Well, so what happens between our 2 storage arrays is data is replicated between the 2. We have one in City Hall and one in the Law Enforcement Center. Then we have a 3rd system to back up those 2 for disaster recovery.
Okay, so it's not 3 different places for the same data.
No.
Right.
Right.
It's different data. Okay, and then how much is a Microsoft license per person?
Per person, I would have to get that information for you, per
because
workstation.
This seems like 225,000 seems like a lot.
Well, it includes the operating system, includes the office
Still
suite.
seems like a lot. And then why do you do 3 years instead of 4 or 5 or?
That's the term that the state of Kansas has negotiated. So it's a 3-year agreement. We buy under the state of Kansas contract.
So it's the state, not the city?
Right.
And is there anything else that's the state, not the city
No.
contracts?
Sorry.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Mark, we have tangible backup locations.
Yes.
Are those locations all in Kansas?
Pardon me?
Are those locations all in Kansas?
Yes.
Have we considered the fact that if something were to happen in our city and in our state, that we need to have a tangible location outside of the state so that if we are in the process of disaster recovery, that we have a redundancy outside?
We've looked at that. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with what we have
Okay.
being spread out across 3 facilities.
And has there been any consideration of moving all of it to the cloud?
No. I've looked at the cost of cloud computing. That's very expensive. It's very expensive. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Yeah. Mr. Biswell, could you go back to those slides, please, on the, because I think maybe either I'm misunderstanding the book here. Yeah, keep going, please. Yeah, like when we do that, is that the annual cost or is that the cost over like 3 years for them? Because it seems like in here.
Yeah, so you see the 5-year CIP amount. We're just averaging that cost out. And I could get you the exact number of what that exact dollar amount of the MDT leases, what they are.
Okay, and the same on, and I'm sorry, could you go up another?
Same on personal computers.
Okay. So, and that's how many total we have. I'm just trying to, okay. Thank you. That's it.
What's the average cost of a desktop or a laptop? What are you paying?
In the past, we were paying about $750 for a desktop. That price, unfortunately, has went up to about $900. As far as laptop computers go, it just depends on what our customer needs in terms of requirements. We can get them as...
Or the employee?
That's our customer, internal customer.
Yes, our employee. Employees are my customers.
So like what's your average then for laptop?
I'm thinking for that one that Brenda has is probably in the $600 range.
They're cheaper than the desktops?
Yes.
So how is that tied to this sheet we have? If I could
Yeah, that's what I was having trouble with.
So as you see on the sheet, we have computer upgrades. Those are our PCs.
So when it says upgrade, that's replacement.
Yeah, replacement. Actually, what it is a technology refresh. We're just refreshing the technology that we have in place.
Real quick on the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. I noticed in 2024, you've got it down at the same price as it is now. Is that, is there like ink on paper that says that or?
No.
Okay.
No, it's just an estimate. It's a projection.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yes, I'm sorry. geographically, where are the 3 backups at?
We have one here in this facility. We have one in City Hall, and we have one at the Law Enforcement Center.
So you have 3 backups all within a 2-mile radius, and that you're comfortable in a disaster area that, like the 66 tornado, we're not going to have any issues.
At this point, I am. We are looking at the potential of moving our disk-to-disk backup system out to Fire Station 12, which will be out on Urish Road. But we need to get some infrastructure in place to make that happen first.
Other question I have is, and this may not be your, do we carry any insurance in regards to hacking, data restoration, all those type of things?
We do have a cyber insurance policy in place. Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I would kind of, furthermore, I'm glad you feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable with that backup situation. I would like something at the very least outside Shawnee County, quite frankly.
I can look into that.
Thank you.
Mr. Biswell, one other question. So the first 3 things are those computer refreshes, but what's the difference between that and like it's cell number 139, there's desktop computer replacement?
Well, basically what I have there, we've got several leases, and so I'm trying to show all the leases that we have in place and what the replacement schedule is for them. But we could probably rework this portion of the spreadsheet so it would make more logical, you could see a more logical progression.
So that is the same thing as computer upgrades?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
They aren't consistent annually, though. Are you shifting, or?
No, this is a CIP. This is an estimate of what the costs are going to be for the replacement on, or the refresh on each one of those leases when we recast them. So it's an estimate.
The desktops are only in there once.
Well, everywhere you see computer upgrade or computer replacement, those are PCs.
Okay.
I guess what we're asking, is it possible for us to get an email, a copy of this spreadsheet? It'd be so much easier for us to look at things and if we had it in this format instead of on paper.
This one we have.
Yeah, it's in the front.
No, in spreadsheet, in Excel format.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, is what I mean, yeah. Otherwise, you can't do any analysis on it. Yeah, it's just that one page.
Smart. He had coffee and stayed at the Holiday Inn.
Other questions? All right, we're into our formal presentation. Pretty good time, a few minutes after 12 here. Thank you, Mark. I guess from my standpoint, we've gone through a lot of information here.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like this was a better venue than what we had last year. I hope you feel the same way. Allowing us to ask questions and dig into some of these projects with our experts here. Obviously, we know this is not the end of the discussion. If we would like to continue to have a discussion on any of the particular projects, as Councilman Mays was talking, we're prepared to do that. But if this is something you need a little more time to digest, we can sure do this at a council meeting, or if your pleasure would be to get back in workshop format, sitting around a table like this talking, we can do that as well.
Yeah,
So,
that'd be awesome.
I take your lead as to what you want for your next steps.
It looks like all of us are looking, I'm looking at that table and somebody's saying one more of these, and I would agree.
Can we do it later than 8:30?
Oh, dear God, yes.
Like 1?
Well,
No, that's too late. That's too late.
Earlier the better.
Well, we'll have 2.
well, and that's just it. Hopefully, we've not ruined your entire day here by doing it at this early start. But we we'll look to reach out to you regarding possible dates in order to be able to get together again and review this. I appreciate your time. It's been very helpful for us to hear these comments. So,
The only thing I would say is make sure that, I know a lot of us have requested information. I'd like to have the time to get that information and also have some time. I don't want to get it on a Thursday or
Sure.
Friday and then
Right.
it'd be Saturday.
Understood.
And I want some time.
We'll, we've notated these questions that weren't able to be answered today, and we'll try and get that within the next several days. So assuming that we don't have a workshop next week, I think we'd have some time to get that. Maybe we do, but we'd have some time to put that together and have time for you to review it. In addition, there have been requests for some supplemental information that we've included in the final book. We are working on that right now, and I think that will provide some additional context to the conversation. So we're piecing this out based on the earlier timeline, but we'll try and get it to you in time to review.
Perfect.
Without seeing any more comments or questions, meeting adjourned. And I dropped the mic.